In this nugget, we take a look at Linux. Linux is pretty much the preferred operating system for hackers, and in particular, there's even some that are developed specifically for hackers that I'll show you as we get going here. Well, so we'll see that in the overview of Linux and why it's of advantage to you. We also take a look at using Linux itself and how to get around in the operating system, and then we'll be taking a look at account management because you may need to create those as you start to work with your Linux targets. All right, before we get started in Linux, I do want to point out something here just as a quick tangent. It doesn't really have a place in any of our other nuggets here, but it's interesting, and that's a utility called disconnect. Now, what's this about? You're probably aware that when you go to a website and you click on something, like if you go to Amazon and click on various products, that you're actually being tracked in a lot of different ways. We don't really always know what all those different ways are. Well, this particular add-on here, or extension, is that what it actually is something that can track that for you. This is available for the major browsers, although with Firefox, it's missing kind of a graphical view, but it's still useful. Anyway, I've already added it to my Chrome browser here, and then this is the kind of stuff that it does for you. So let's say I went to foxnews.com, and I was looking at a particular story there, and I let this thing run in the background. Well, I barely really clicked anything. I just clicked on the story, and look what it did. It was trying to track through 6 advertising requests, an analytic of some kind, and if you take a look at the visualized page, you'll see even more. First of all, look at this. Content was 66 requests. Once you install this disconnect, it prevents many of the requests from gathering information about what you're clicking on. And if I click visualize page, you'll see all the different companies or whatever that were trying to track what I was doing here. Okay? As if my wife tracking my internet activity isn't enough, now I've got these folks here as well. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look here at Linux just as an overview. First of all, it was created by somebody initially called Linus Torvalds, or Linus Torvalds, I guess if you want to say that. And he kind of made a play on his name of Linus and Unix. And that's where we wind up with Linux. So what he wanted to do was to take an operating system that was typically put on Unix machines and put it on more inexpensive hardware because Unix machines were comparatively very expensive. So we came up with an equivalent here that installs on x86 machines. Initially, it could fit on a floppy disk. It was very small, simple, and lightweight. And compared to Windows, Linux is generally still very small, simple, and lightweight. Does not require nearly as many resources. Other installations of or distributions of Linux can fit on smaller thumb drives. It can fit on a 256 megabyte thumb drive, for example. A lot of them you can run directly from the CD without actually installing the operating system on a local hard drive. So very, very flexible. And there's very many different distributions. Kind of the core of it all is very similar. It's all based on the same, Linux kernel, or many of them are. But there's Debian, there's Red Hat, there's Ubuntu, and then we'll have a couple of other ones that I'll talk to you about here in a moment that are particularly for hackers. But hackers generally prefer to use Linux. Now, most hackers will have multiple operating systems regardless, either as attack machines or as target machines. However, they do prefer to mostly make the source of the attacks a Linux machine, and then the targets are usually going to be Windows machines. It's also free. That's another big selling point of Linux. There are some that you do have to buy for, especially if you want support, like Red Hat is one of those. However, most of the other distributions are very, very good and free. It's also a very flexible operating system. You can install all kinds of additional software into them, into the various distributions, and you can do a lot with it. The resource requirements, as I mentioned earlier, very, very small. You can install it with just a few megabytes of memory in many cases, although most of the time we'll use a lot more than that. It's considered also inherently more secure than Windows. Now, I'm sure that folks at Microsoft would argue with me on that one. Some people would just say that that's only really true because Windows is a bigger target for attacks. Therefore, there's more vulnerabilities developed against Windows because more hackers are interested in hacking it. Well, there's some truth to that, certainly, and I'm not going to get into the bumper sticker argument over that. But generally speaking, most folks still consider it to be more secure than Windows, even if it's only because it's a smaller target. Now, there's several different distributions of Linux, and I'm not going to list them all here, but there's several different distributions that are particularly geared towards hackers. One of those would be Backbox. Let me show you that one real quick. And here it is. And I'm just kind of showing you this, not because we're going to spend a lot of time here. I'm actually going to be using Kali Linux, which again, I'll show you here in a little while as well. But that's just kind of what it's about. And if we take a look at this, the menu up here at the top, you'll see that auditing gives you a lot of hackers tools that you can use for this. And most of these hacker-specific distributions of Linux will give you a lot of the tools already pre-installed. All the dependencies are already there. Everything's really all in place for you already. And then you can just take your pick of which one of these tools that you want to work with. So they're all really pretty good tools there, and pretty good installations of Linux. Then the next one that we might have here would be Backtrack. I'm not really going to show you that one because it's starting to get a little bit dated. There's still good distributions of Backtrack out there. However, the folks that created Backtrack have really come out with a newer version that's pretty much the same idea, and that one is called Kali Linux, K-A-L-I Linux. And that's what we're looking at right here. Again, if you take a look at the applications menu, you'll see that in this case, under Kali Linux, we have all of our security tools here. In fact, the top 10 are grouped up here, such as John the Ripper. That's a great password cracker. This is a great way to crack passwords over Wi-Fi. So several different tools that we see here, and we won't exhaust all of these, for certain. However, you get the idea. There's a lot of different cool tools that we can work with. And in addition, both Backbox as well as Kali and any of the other distributions work just fine as their own installation of Linux, and you can use it as you would use any other version of Linux. But again, they're specifically for hacking. Most of the time, we'll be using Kali for this series. Okay, so when it comes to actually using Linux, you'll turn on the computer, and when it starts up, older versions of Linux or versions of Linux where an administrator has forced it to go to the CLI will go to the CLI, and that's the command line interface, meaning that there's no graphical user interface like Windows and stuff like that. If you are at a CLI and you want the graphical user interface, type Start X, and it will load whichever UI has been packaged for that particular installation of Linux. Most of the time I'm using GNOME, G-N-O-M-E. That's a very popular one, and there's several other really good ones out there. Kali and Backtrack Linux, as well as Backbox, which I showed you earlier, they all go directly to the UI, but of course you could go out of the UI to a CLI if you wanted to. And Linux is also case sensitive, and that's going to really throw off a lot of Windows folks, like me. For example, let me just open up a Windows command prompt here. And where am I at here? I'm in the users trainer directory. So if I wanted to go to, for example, let me do a dir and see what else is here. If I wanted to go to the contacts or desktop, let's say I do a CD, and there's desktop right there. So I could do desktop and press enter, and that'd be just fine. Okay, no big deal there. However, if we are in Linux, like we are here in Kali, if I open up a terminal there, and it's called a terminal instead of a command prompt in Linux, then I wanted to change that directory. Let's see where we are first of all. I could do a dir, just like I can in Windows, and I can also do an ls. Now, what's the difference? Notice the color difference. The folders will appear in this blue color right here. So it's color-coded. If there's other things, they could appear in other colors, but you get a little bit more knowledge there of what it is that you're looking at. Because in Windows, of course, it would have a dir and it would show you there was a directory. Anyway, remember in Windows, I just typed a lowercase d. Here, if I typed a lowercase d, desktop, to change to, then it won't do it. Why? Because, of course, the case is wrong. So I'll do a CD and then space capital D. And by the way, you can also use tab completion. So I'll press tab and press enter. And obviously now, there I am. So you do have to get a little bit used to that. Also, well, let's take a look at the file system itself. And of course, a lot of the file navigation I've already shown you here, just in terms of changing directories and moving up to the root directory and so forth. Sometimes you'll also have to, if you execute a command, for example, maybe I'm running, I don't know, John the Ripper, which is a popular password cracking utility. If you want to execute some of those things, you might have to type a // and then, John or whatever the command is. Here in Kali Linux, this particular distribution, you don't usually have to do that sort of thing. But depending upon the distribution that you have, you may need to do that. And that forces it to run from the directory that you are currently in. Okay, so it might have to do with path statements and the like as well. Now, you can also, again, go to the computer here, and you can see here I've got a CD, floppy, and file system. File system would be the equivalent of just our hard drive, really. And if I just double-click on it, you can see that I have a folder structure, again, similar to what I would have in Windows, although I don't think there's very many names that are in common here. The executables that we'll work with, if you want to call them that, but any programs that will run, will very often be in bin or sbin, bin or sbin, depending on how you want to pronounce that, I guess. And then you can see here that, for example, there's cat. We'll look at that in a moment, but that's a simple text editor. Here's something we can use to change ownership of files or modify files. Here's something that we can do to, where I think there's, gzip. Yeah, that's something we can do to zip together files and folders and or compress them. So you get an idea there. In the bin, there's some common executable types that we would have. Sbin would have additional programs that might be installed. Here, for example, there's fdisk, which is a way that you can, is very similar to the Windows one. You can kind of do a listing of your disks or volumes, for example. There's also a lot of hackers tools that are installed here as well. So just wanted to point out that there's a couple of different directories where you might have these executables. Libraries similar to what we would have with a DLL library in Windows. There's also a 64-bit version since I'm running a 64-bit version here. If I double-click on media, notice that we have a CD-ROM there and a CD-ROM 0. Okay, so a reason why that's interesting, by the way, is because anything that you actually see, let me go back to our file system here. Let me go all the way to the top again. Notice the CD drive and the floppy drive. Well, in order to access those, what Linux does is it has a file that represents each one of those items. And then it mounts that, and then you can access it. Same is true of any hardware within Linux, by the way. For even the CPU is actually mounted as a file, and then you access it in that way. So anyway, let's see if we had something else here. Home. In a home directory, this will be where you have any users that you've installed. In Kali Linux, they seem to usually just create only the desktop folder beyond the user, but other distributions, such as Ubuntu, the last time I used it, would have other things like documents, downloads. I think there's a pictures or my pictures, something like that as well. But again, different distributions will vary a little bit on some of these things. For the root account, which is equivalent to the local administrator account in Windows and that has full access and authority over the operating system, it will have its own kind of home directory at the root. Okay, so whereas the trainer account had a trainer account inside the home folder, the root account has one right at the root of the file system, and then you can see there's my desktop and so forth. All right, let's take a look here at viewing and editing text. Now, from a user perspective, we prefer to use fancy graphical, editors of various types, right? Maybe something like OpenOffice, which is free, or just using Google Docs to edit our documents. And these are all things that give us a toolbars, and we can bold things, make the fonts bigger, add color, all that sort of stuff. In hacker world, we don't usually care about that stuff too much until it comes time to prepare reports for a pen test. But as we're actually doing the hacking, we often want the simplest, easy to access text editor that doesn't use many resources at all. So, for example, let's see if I went to my system here. If I wanted to write about something, I'm just trying to figure something out. What would I write about? Well, I was just looking at a picture, by the way. I went skiing the other day with my son-in-law and my son, and I crashed and wrecked my knee, so I torqued it up really good. And the doctor put me on a $600 bionic-looking brace. Who knows how long I'll have to wear that thing. Anyway, so if I wanted to write about that and share with you my tale of woe, I might use the cat text editor, which is one of the most basic, simple editors out there. You do a greater than symbol, and then after that, you would enter in the name of the file. So I'd say iTorqueit.txt. Now, I'm putting a txt on the end just for my own reference so that I know it's a simple text file. But the fact of the matter is, in Linux, file extensions don't mean anything. That's just for my own information, so to speak. So I'll press enter here, and I'll say, I torqued it good. Torqued? Is it torqued? No, it's tweaked, isn't it? Torqued, that's what Miley Cyrus does. Boy, you don't want to see me torquing. Oh, for crying out loud. I'll just press enter here, and then to get out of this, I'll press Control D. And then if we do a ls now, we'll see that I have my iTorqueit.txt file. If I want to view what the contents of that file are, and that's something, again, that we'll often do in Linux, I just want to view it, and I don't want to edit it, I can just do a more, and then iTorqueit.txt, again, tab completion, and we can see that, yes, indeed, I torqued it good. Torquing. Where do I come up with this stuff? I haven't had to torque since I was young and needed the money. So anyway, just with more, I'm not really editing. I just want to look at it. And then if I wanted to add to that text, I could do again cat, and then this time a double greater than sign, and then I torque it again, the rest of that text. And then notice that it doesn't show me what's already typed there. I just would continue to type. So again, it's pretty primitive editor, but at least it works. And I would say, I meant to say tweaked. And then press Control D again. And now if I do, up arrow a couple of times to do the more again, we can see that it did indeed modify that file. Now let's also work with this file a little bit. Let's see, where is it? It's in the root folder. Okay, so if I want to double check which folder I'm in, I can do a pwd and press enter, and it'll tell me that I'm in the root. Well, I might not want it there. Maybe I want it on my desktop. So I would just say move, or which would be actually mv, and then I torque it.txt to, and then I would just say desktop, okay, and press enter, and now we should see it pop up right here. Okay, so that would be one way to do it. Also, if I wanted to rename it, I could do that here as well. Maybe I would say, you don't rename the same way we do in Windows, where you can just type rename. Here I would just move it, but to a different name. I torqued it.txt. Where is it? I got to change it to the desktop, don't I? CD to the desktop, and then move it to I torque it.txt to, and then I just type in the next name, the new name that I want it to be, and it would be I tweak it.txt. Okay, and then now we should see right up here, indeed the name did change. Now I could also copy it, which would be quite easy. I could copy I tweak it.txt back to, let's just go back to the root, actually / root, and we'll just copy it there. Okay, so if I change directories again here and go up a level and do an ls, you'll see that indeed I have a copy of that file here as well as now on my desktop. To remove the file, I would just do rm, and then again I tweak it, or whatever the name of the file is, and press enter. Now another simple text editor I could use would be either VI or, in this case, VIM, which is VI improved. And then I'll enter in the name of the file that I want to work with, and we can see here that there we go. There's the same file we were working with earlier. In order to start editing the text, I press the I key, the letter I, and it puts me in what we call insert mode, and then I can just start adding additional text. Hello, friends, okay, something like this. And then when I'm done with any text that I want, I'll press escape, and then you enter in colon, and you can either do a W, and you should look down in the lower left to see what I'm typing, a colon W to write the changes and keep VI open, or VIM, they're both the same again in that respect. And then I could do a colon and then an X, which would save the changes and exit the program. Now if I do a more, I tweaked it .text, we can see that indeed it did keep that additional text. Likewise, there's also a graphical VI. Let's go ahead and go to accessories, and then you see this GVIM. That's graphical VI improved. And what do you know? Here we have it. Pretty much same thing. Here we could just start typing the same way we would before. Although we do have additional options. We can save the current file. We can save any additional files that we have open, and so on. So it's a little bit more familiar in terms of graphical user interface, but it's again a very simple one. And then one more if you wanted to. And again, there's all kinds of text editors out there, but just so you have something to work with here within Kali Linux, we have those three that I've already shown you, and then we have LeafPad, which once again is very similar in terms of being a very simple editor. It's very similar, I think, to Notepad in Windows. Now, sometimes you'll work with these commands and not really know how to work with them, not know the various options in the switches or options. So in order to get that information, you can use the help system, which accompanies some of the applications, or the man page, which also accompanies some of the applications, actually most of the applications. So let's take a look at that. So if I go back to VIM, for example, if I just wanted to help, I could do VIM and then -- help. And that gives me some of the basic help functions that I could access here. It's usually not quite as verbose as a man page. Kind of just gives me the quick and dirty instructions, but there is also a man page, so I could do a man VIM, and that would give me a lot more information. And I'll just press the space bar to continue on down through this one page at a time, and it just kind of goes on and on and on until you get to the end. And if I want to quit early or at any time, I'll just press the Q to quit, as you can see right down here, and then I'm now out of the man page. So the man page will really help you, especially if you want additional details. Also, a lot of times I just go to Google. Google is such a great resource now that if I want to find out how to do something, I'll just type it in there without having to read through the entire man page. In addition, you may need to know how to change certain network configuration settings. So let's see what we have for that. Again, if you're at the command line, it's probably going to be easier if you just want something quick and dirty. I will show you in a few moments here how to use the UI to do this as well. But if I wanted to look at my IP address, for example, in my interfaces, I would just type ifconfig. Now, you might be looking at that and saying, James, you know, that's not right because everybody knows it's ipconfig. No, that's IP configuration in Windows. Here in Linux, we want to look at interface config, so it's ifconfig. Okay, so there we go. Now, the bottom one down here is, if we take a look at it, this is going to be the loopback adapter. That's the loopback address, and we can see here that we have a loopback address right there. Okay, so it's loopback adapter, loopback address. My other interface, however, is eth0, and it has an IP address right here. What if I didn't want that particular IP address and I wanted to change it to something else? It's actually really easy. Just ifconfig. Let me click in here. ifconfig, and then the name of the interface that I want to change, eth0, and then the IP address that I want it to have, 10.10.10.244, let's say. And now if I do an ifconfig again, then we'll notice now that it has changed to 10.10.10.244. Now, if I want to use the graphical user interface to make changes here, I can certainly do that as well. I can go to Applications, System Tools, then Preferences, and then finally Network Connections. That's kind of a lot of menus to go through, though. What I usually do, I'll just go to this graphical user interface item up here, this network connection looking thing up at the top, and I'll just right-click there, and I'll choose Edit Connections. Takes us to the same place we would have gotten through the menus, and then we'll just simply click on Add. And by the way, anything that I change in this will not be effective until I reboot the system. So I'll make a change here. I'll specify the MAC address of the network interface that I want to change, and that would be our eth0 right here. Then I'll go over to my IP version 4 settings, and I don't want to use DHCP. Let's say I want to make it a manual addressing scheme. I'll click on Add and enter in the manual address that I want it to have. So it's just been changed to 244. Let's change it back to 19. The network mask is how many masked bits I want, which would also be interpreted as 255.255.255 with a 24-bit subnet mask. And then the gateway 10.10.10.1. Let's just do it that way. Okay. And so that's pretty much it. I've got all that stuff. Let's enter in a DNS server. I think I got a 10.10.10.5 somewhere. That'll work. And that's pretty much it for simple settings. I'll just click on Save. And then, like I said before, I will have to restart this computer. On some implementations in some operating systems, you can just do a, here I'll clear everything. You can do a ifconfig and then down an interface. But I do an ifconfig here. We see that we're still on 244. If I do an ifconfig eth0 th0 down, and then follow that with an up, then on some implementations of Linux, an ifconfig would then show the new IP address here. With Kali, maybe this is true of all Debian, I don't know really, then we'll just have to reboot the system. So I'll just do a reboot. Is it reboot? Yeah. Reboot. And then it's going to go down, and when it comes back up again, we should see that it has the new IP address. Alright, so the system has rebooted, so I'm going to enter a login here just as the root account. So let me click on Other, enter in root. Remember, it's a case-sensitive username, so I can't enter in a capital R. And then I'll enter in the password. And then now once we go back into this, I'm going to go back into a terminal, and we should see that our IP address is now changed back to the .19. So ifconfig, and sure enough, there it is now at .19. Now, there's several other commands, Linux commands, that I think might be useful for you. And obviously, I'm not going to exhaust all of them because this isn't really a full-on Linux course like you'd get with a Linux black belt like Sean Powers, who also records for CBT Nuggets. Look up his videos if you want to know all of the stuff relating to Linux. I'm kind of more of a yellow belt in Linux. I'm competent and I can get around just enough to do the hacking that I want. So, and the next command that I want to show you, though, would be the grep command. You don't just type grep, though, and press enter. That doesn't really do a lot for us. What we would do with grep is we use it to get us an end result. So, for example, you could use it to find a certain result, maybe a list of hosts, for example, or a list of commands or something, and then you could pipe that to an actual executable or some kind of a function. So, let's say if I'm doing an ls here, for example, we see we've got all kinds of different files and stuff, and maybe the executable or the file that I'm looking for, I can't think of the name of it right now, but I know it starts with NTFS, and you can see we have a few files with NTFS name in there. But you can't see the forest for the trees sometimes, so I just want to do an ls, and I'll pipe that to grep, which basically is saying I want you to look for any files that have NTFS in the name. All right, and I'm going to zoom in on that so you can see it a little bit better. All right, and then I'll press enter, and now sure enough, it's showing me any of the files that have NTFS in the name, and now maybe from here I can narrow it down and say, oh, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to use NTFS undelete, which is, by the way, a very handy utility to get back files that a user may have deleted and that are not even in the recycle bin. All right, then, now having cleared the screen, I want to point out that within Linux, as a user, let's just say that we're using Linux as our desktop operating system as an office worker, then you would probably use only a principle of least privilege. In other words, an unprivileged account. You can see here, however, I'm logged on as the root account, which is the highest level of privilege that we can get within Linux and log on interactively. So that's pretty high level. Now, it's okay for hacking, but for users who don't normally use that, as well as administrators who work with Linux systems. Again, you'll log on with a kind of a minimal account, and then when you want to elevate your privilege, you'll type in SU and press enter, and it will prompt you for the username and password of a privileged account. And it's kind of similar in that respect to user account control in Windows, and it prevents you from having an average user perform an administrative function, potentially as a security risk or just something that could potentially damage their own system. Now, since I'm logged in within a privileged account, I can make certain changes. For example, if I wanted to change a password, okay, PASSWD is what we would do for that. And it would just change the password for the currently logged on user, which is my root account. So I'll just enter in a new password, and I'll confirm that. And then now I've updated my password successfully. You don't get any asterisks or anything like that with the way you would with Windows password changes, for example. Another command that we could use would be the kill command. Now, this we could use to terminate a process that is not shutting down gracefully or that we don't have any other way of ending. And sometimes you're going to have to use this with hacking tools because they're not all fully refined. They're not all supported by multi-billion-dollar corporations with full support and all of that sort of stuff. So they may not necessarily be as stable or as reliable as your run-of-the-mill application. So let's say I'm running, VI, and I just can't seem to get it to conclude or to quit. So I'll just do a VIM. I'll just get it running here. And then I'm also going to do a Control-Shift-T to open up another tab within my terminal here. Now I want to do a PS, and I'll just do a hyphen capital A, and that's going to show me all of the applications that are running. All right. This is another good usefulness of grep, by the way. Now, I think I can see what's going on here. I think I've got, there's VIM down there, and I can see that it's process number 3677. But sometimes the application you're looking for, and notice that this is not alphabetical or anything, it's kind of hard to see exactly which one I'm trying to find here. It's just, again, the forest for the trees. So I could do a PS -A, and then I could grep for VIM. Okay, and then it would show me immediately only the one that has VIM in it. Once again, it's 3677. Now, if I wanted to kill that, I would just type kill -9 is kind of a graceful, semi-graceful way to kill that process. And then you enter in the process number, not the name of the application. So it's 3677, and press enter. And now let's see if that application is still running over here. And we can see that it's not. Still left over the text that we have here, but notice that I'm at a flashing cursor now for my prompt. So apparently we have been able to successfully kill it. If I do a PSA again, looking for Vim, then we see that it's not running at all. Now going back over here, I'll do a VIM again and get that process running. Once again, I'm going to look for the executable, or rather the process number. Notice that it changes when I run it the next time. It's somewhat randomized. So it's now 3756. Now, if I'm really having trouble killing that one, And sometimes, again, you'll have that with applications. And kill -9 did not work. I could do a kill, and this is the most the most severe kind of kill you can get. -15, 3756. I'll press enter, and then we'll see that again over here, VIM caught a deadly signal term, and it finished it, terminated. Wow, pretty dramatic, but at least it's effective. And then finally, let's take a look at how to get additional applications. And we can use apt-get for that. Now, sometimes you'll try to run an application and it just won't be there, and it'll actually tell you in a return message that you can type apt-get to get that command. So, for example, I want to get Kate. In this case, it just says command not found. It didn't tell me to type apt-get, but I know that I can get Kate. And what is Kate, by the way? Just another simple text editor. I'm not trying to do anything fancy here. I'm just trying to show you how to run apt-get, and then I would type install, and then Kate. Okay, and so you can see how that looks. And then once I do that, I'll press enter. It'll just go out to the internet. You don't have to have an internet connection for this. And it'll find all of the dependencies and the libraries that are necessary, and it will download all of that. Once again, if there's a dependency that has to be there in order for Kate to work, it'll also download that dependency. So that's very, very handy, because back in the old days, you had to kind of manually find all the dependencies, manually install all of them, and then install the application. This is so much easier. All right, when it's finished, it says end, as you can see down here at the end. So I'm just going to go to another terminal here and type Kate, and we should see the Kate graphical user interface open up. And again, this is just another simple text editor. So how would I actually get rid of Kate if I wanted to get rid of Kate and uninstall it? Sounds like I'm breaking up with a girlfriend, right? How do I get rid of Kate? She did me wrong. So let's say that I would do that by typing apt get, and then I could do a couple of different ways. One would be purge, and then Kate. And what that would do is remove the packages plus remove any configuration files. I didn't really make any configuration files because I didn't even work with Kate yet, particularly. So let's do remove instead. That would be another way to remove Kate. This just tells me kind of a summary of the different things that we'll do to get rid of Kate. And are you sure you want to continue? And I'll say, yes, she did me wrong. We'll get rid of Kate. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how to install and uninstall various packages. Now let's take a look at Linux account management here as well. And this is going to be important because when you compromise a target machine, you're probably going to need to have some administrative access like the root account to create an additional account. Why would I do that? Well, you have to log on as the root account sometimes on a Linux target, but you may not want to stay that way constantly because it becomes a little bit obvious. So we might want to create an additional account that might look a little bit more innocuous, but that may still have some level of privileged account, or that is just a generic user, and you're using it to explore the system, to explore the network, and to see what all is there. Anyway, you can add an account from the command line, typing user add, followed by the name of the account you want to create. You can modify the account with user mod, and then you can delete the account with user delete, and you can also use the graphical user interface for all of those things here as well. Now, let me give you an example, by the way, as a quick tangent of one thing you might want to do with this. You might notice my URL up here at the top. You might want to go to rapid7.com and just look for information about something called Metasploitable. This is a deliberately weakened version of Linux so that you can use it with a utility called Metasploit, which we'll be looking at later on in our course here. And this is something that we can use to easily compromise and attack various machines. Well, Metasploitable is deliberately weak, and it makes it real easy to practice your skills using Metasploitable. And that's why you might want to work with these different accounts, because you might want to create those on a Metasploitable machine, for example. So I'm going to go through these real quick. If I wanted to create a user account, I would type user, let me click up there, user add, followed by the name. I've already got a trainer account, so let's just enter a trainer 01 account. 01 and press enter. Now I've got an account called trainer user 01. If I want to change the password, PASSWD, remember that's how I change my password for the trainer 01 account, and I'll enter in the new password. Okay. And now I've got a password for that trainer 01 account. Before when I used PASSWD and didn't specify a user account, it'll always change the account of whoever is currently logged on, which of course was the root account. And then we can also use user mod, or in this case, I'm just going to use user delete because I'm pretty much done with that account. But user delete trainer. I am having trouble typing today. trainer01. And now we no longer have the account. Now, if you want to do this from the UI, you could go to Applications and do this instead. And we would just go down to System Tools, and then we would be able to go over here to System Settings. So I'll go back down here to System Settings. And then I can click there to see that we have the user item for user accounts down here at the bottom. Again, this is going to be pretty simple. I can just click the plus symbol and make them maybe an administrator account if I want to. Trainer. By the way, as a habit, I usually capitalize the first letter of a name. But in Linux, that's probably not a good idea because it gets confusing. Because remember, this case sensitive. So I'm just going to enter in this lower trainer02 account. And I'll create that account. And now we have trainer02. Notice that the account is disabled by default. That's because it doesn't have a password. So I'll set a password now, but I can also choose these various other options, which I think explain themselves. And I'll enter in the password. Okay. Apparently I'm just using a fair password. It's kind of a generic password I use for training only. And then that's pretty much it. If you want a hint, you can enter that in as well. And then I'll just choose change. And then now we have our account. In this nugget, we took a look at Linux as the preferred operating system for hackers. And we're particularly going to be working with possibly a little bit of Backbox, but mostly with Kali Linux for our purposes in this series. We took a look at an overview of Linux and, again, why it's so useful to hackers and why they seem to like it. Then we also took a look at actually using Linux, working with the file system a little bit, working with account management, and so on. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.